Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance's Crypto Roundup for Friday, January 23rd, 2026. Ron Quaranta here with my amazing friends and co-hosts, David Brill and Joshua Ashley Clayman. Good to see you both. Before we begin, for everyone in the audience on YouTube and X, LinkedIn Live, thank you so much for joining us. Please keep in mind, obviously, usual disclaimers, nothing we're talking about is any sort of advice, and what we're really discussing are our own personal opinions, not necessarily the opinions of our respective firms. If you're joining us on any of those platforms and you've got questions for David or Josh or I, please hit us up in the chat. We're happy to try to address them. David, Josh, we're almost through January. I think all three of us, no, sorry, Josh, not David. You and I are preparing for the snow apocalypse that's about to hit a good chunk of the country. Josh, what's going on?
Well, I mean, holding aside the stockpiling in advance of Snowmageddon or whatever it will be called this time, I think Winter Storm Fern, which sounds nothing like like snow. Yep. I think one of the things that's really been shocking to me, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it, guys. I mean, what is this? I mean, I understand that it's gone up a little since then, but I saw a headline on CoinDesk of Bitcoin at 88.5, silver passing 100 for the first time, gold, I think, on track for, was it 5,000? Would love your thoughts. Why are we seeing this? What's going on that silver has become so, such a big thing now? And what's up with Bitcoin?
David, Josh, it's a great question, and I don't know if we have enough time to cover it all. And Josh, David, I'll stop with my jokes about my silver coin collection, but look, in my mind, there are broad macroeconomic and geopolitical headwinds to a lot of the things that we're seeing. I am slightly disappointed that Bitcoin's not the safe haven people thought it would have been back in the day. People and organizations will flee to what they know, David, and gold and silver are part of what they know. I think there are some technical things around 90 for Bitcoin that are really concerning, and I think the other headwind is legislation. I think lack of legislation and some of the fear mongering, David and Josh, I've seen in the reporting of market structure legislation hasn't really been helpful to Bitcoin's price.
Yeah, I think I would add that, look, there's a lot of turmoil in the world, and I think other countries don't want to buy as many dollars, and they're looking for other things to own. So they're looking to own gold, they're looking to own silver, and I mean the prices have just run up dramatically. I mean, silver almost 100, gold almost at 5K. I really think that between AI, gold, and silver, the liquidity that might have gone to crypto has been taken by those. Yeah. Those. And I think the other thing is we're just still seeing a lot of selling. I think there are two more things: a lot of selling, and some of it's being absorbed by the ETFs. And then I think, we're still unwinding what happened on October 10th. And I think I heard somebody else say this on a podcast, but, maybe October 10th was like sort of even if it wasn't the top, that was like the top signal. And we're just seeing unwinding ever since.
And for those watching and following along at home, just to refresh everyone's recollection, October 10th is the flash crash date. Is that what you're talking about? So we're the audience, where there were tons and tons of forced liquidations due to a flash crash.
Look at Josh talking about forced liquidations. This is like awesome.
I'll credit to you guys.
Well, we got to do the shout out to Emma Channing, who's watching. Do we have risk off at 2 minutes in? I think it was 1:30. Josh put us right there, Emma. David, Josh, go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
I don't want to step on whatever you were going to say. I do wonder something about what David, or maybe it was you, Ron. I can't remember who said it, but whoever was saying that the market legislation, market structure was having an effect on Bitcoin's price. I do wonder, that may be for like the broader space, like the broader world, I should say. But it's kind of interesting because I would have thought that Bitcoin is one of, if not the only digital asset where we actually don't necessarily need the market structure bill, because we've had clarity that it is a commodity and not a security for some time. But is this just, people more broadly outside of our space not really understanding?
I'm going to say something that's going to sound more or less intelligent than I mean it to be. But David, Josh, I think Bitcoin, when we talk about store of value, not serving the function that we would have thought, I think that's coming. But David, I think Bitcoin's a sentiment mirror, actually. I think it's a sentiment reflector. It is much easier for high liquidity instruments, including, Josh, things like Bitcoin, to reflect market sentiment than it is for RON token trading on some ridiculous exchange. And I think everything percolates up or down from that. And once you weave in the macro stuff about gold being risk on or risk off, David, do you see the sentiment perspective the same way I do?
I see it as sentiment. I don't think market structure is affecting Bitcoin or Ether because I think those are sort of trading safe havens now.
Yeah.
Look, I think the smart investors accumulate in times like these, where it's not sexy, it's not exciting. We might be in a consolidation phase. So I think smart investors are accumulating. But I also think that, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot is, like, how do you value the altcoins? How do you value, Bitcoin and Ether? And I think we have a little bit of a valuation challenge. When we look at the altcoins, like I have some favorites, which you both know about, and they're doing well in terms of like building. And I think what's really going on is everybody is building. So even if the prices are moving, people are moving forward and people are building. But ultimately, until we find a way to value certain tokens, it's really hard for somebody who's not really crypto native or really interested in the technology to understand, well, why is one token trading at this and why is another trading at that? So David, I think that's another challenge, a structural challenge.
Just to go back to that, Josh, if I could, because you raised something interesting. You said buyers are buying on, I'm going to extrapolate, buyers are buying on the dips in a way. Is it institutional or is it retail though?
I think it's a mix of both. I mean, I think clearly there are retail who are buying. Like even I saw today on CoinDesk that UBS is going to offer crypto trading to select private banking clients. So I think there are retail getting exposure. I think there's institutions getting exposure. And I think there are a lot of legacy holders who are selling and continue to sell.
And don't forget the wirehouses that we've been talking about for years. This is the year many of them will begin to offer. So it hasn't happened yet. So I expect more.
The one thing I would say, Ron, is I think there is some of that buying, and that's what's, sucking up some of the, sale, like what's for sale. I think there's much more selling than we realize. And if it weren't for the ETFs and the institutional buying, we would see, a meaningful move in the price.
Yeah, and I would just say, notwithstanding all this price action change from what we might have hoped to see at this point, again, for the audience, none of this is investment advice or anything like that. What I would say is on the side with the banks and large institutions, from projects that I've been working on that had kind of meandered for quite some time, there really is a push to get them shipped. Whatever that may mean, right? For a bank shipping product or shipping a service or something or a program, it's quite different. But I had wondered, whether some of the dips in price might slow down momentum, right? That maybe when we were at 126 or wherever we were with Bitcoin price in the fall, that then people were raring to go and maybe there'd be a pullback. But I haven't seen that. In fact, I mean, I think we're seeing an intensification, including not just, the programs that were already like in flight, but with new activities and also a huge interest in tokenization. Huge, including of traditional securities and things like that. I do have another question though for you guys about kind of market action. And, this will, for all of those at home, show how I am nowhere near the exalted Ron and David
Oh.
in terms of this kind of
Use the
stuff.
word exalted. Come on.
I'm calling on you on high to let me know. But could it be? I mean, we keep seeing, at least I keep seeing, including a text from you guys, about a whole bunch of forced liquidations here, forced liquidations there, positions being closed here. Again, not investment advice. But could there be forces saying we don't want all these people having leverage, or we don't want these positions out there? Could there be some kind of concerted push? I know that sounds a little weird to say out loud, but I do wonder,
Are there forces behind the scene that are
trying to kick people off?
I mean, David, I'm sure you've got an opinion on that, and I get the gist of your question, Josh. I think there's enough liquidity in some of the big BTC and ETH, for example, that there will be large leveraged plays to the upside or the downside. And when institutions in particular have conviction, they will make those large play moves that will either force liquidations one way or the other. And here's the thing I'll add to that, and David, please tell me if you agree or disagree. When we were talking about forced liquidations, call it 5 years ago, I don't remember what Bitcoin was at 5 years ago. Forced liquidations caused this cascade of catastrophe. Like everyone sold, the universe is ending, it's another crypto winter. Ron, why don't you open a wine bar because this is all going away? We can have forced liquidations and still have Bitcoin at 89.8. That's an evolved market to me, David.
Yeah. So what I'd say, Josh, is I think it's an evolved market, and there's always going to be chasing stops and chasing, different price ranges to liquidate people who are using leverage. So I think, like Ron said, it's just you're not feeling it as dramatically, but I think there's a little bit of that gambling ethos in this space, and that's going to happen. Look,
David.
One thing. I think this is mature to the point where I remember, you could get a 2x in a weekend with an altcoin or things like that, and it's not happening anymore. And so this is where the gambling, this and the memes are where the gambling has gone. And look, also you have to remember people are hedging positions. They're hedging their options exposure. They're hedging, maybe long Bitcoin and short calls. So there's a lot of things behind the scenes that are going on. So, but I agree with Ron. It's healthy. And it's good that there's activity, because if there wasn't activity, then it would really be problematic.
Look at David throwing out options strategy there, Josh. Did you catch that?
I sure did. Yes. And
can I add one more thing to that?
Yeah,
though? I'm
100%.
sorry,
100%.
David. To that point, though, when the three of us talk about the gambling aura of Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I'll add some other tokens there that the gambling aspect's gone away. I don't just think the gambling mindset's moved to the alts, though. I think it's also moved to other things. It's moved to prediction markets, for example. Yeah. So, whether someone supports or doesn't support prediction markets, the gambling aspect of what was in cryptos evolved away to that leaves cooler heads in the crypto space.
Yeah, and look, I think with prediction markets, you can get outcomes much quicker. Depending on what you're predicting on. And look, I think if somebody has that mentality, those are exciting. Like, you see these different events, and, I don't want to minimize some of the world events that people are gambling on, but they're really interesting. And, if you wanted to take a view, you could take a view. So
I want to know if David's hitting the prediction markets on his three teams, Josh, that he generally watches.
Well, I will say I'm a little bummed that my daughter's Miami Hurricanes did not win in the national championship. I think there's a little bit of self-inflicted harm, but no prediction market bets were made. But there was a heavy rooting interest, just fell a little bit short. But I do have an interesting, you can really bet on anything. Like, you could bet on who's going to win the midterm elections. You can bet on, will there be regime change in a country? So there's a lot of things. I think that's kind of sort of captured the imagination.
So here's a question, David and Josh. And I know, Josh, I cut you off a bit earlier, but I just want to throw this last thing out there. we don't advocate for any particular market, but do you think the evolution of prediction markets is an overall good thing? I'm digressing. I know it's not supposed to be the show about prediction markets.
Look, I am all for products. If people want to use products, I'm all for experimenting and allowing people to, make predictions on certain things, and it's really what the market will bear, Ron. If people are interested in it, it'll flourish and there'll be a lot of volume. If people aren't interested in it, then there won't. So I'm all for the market dynamics and seeing where it plays out.
Yeah, I am too. I think what's interesting though is, there is for some, as was noted, a gambling aspect. But then at a certain point, it's also, I think, a good data indicator for sentiment, right?
Yeah.
And also at some point, at a critical mass, it can become a driver of what actually happens. I know it seems that we've seen that, including in connection with elections and various other types of even like price action in crypto, right? So I do think at some point, is prediction, is that driving reality? It's interesting. It's interesting to think about. But I do, yeah. I will say also, since David mentioned Miami, as you guys know, or you may know, I'm originally from Indiana. So that was,
She was happy to see Miami lose, is what she's
I was
trying to
not happy to see Miami lose, but I was excited for IU. I used to live on the campus when I was a child because in middle school and stuff like that. My mom went back to school there. And apparently Kirkwood was like blowing up. That's like a street, like not literally blowing up, but like,
You got to be careful how you word these things.
Enthusiasm was contagious. So I'm sorry, David, for that loss, but I'm little.
Look, Miami wasn't expected to be in the finals this year, and they kind of overachieved. So I was happy, and my daughter had a good first-year experience watching football. So I think that's great. But I'm going to do a little segue, Josh, since we've been talking about prediction markets. If you had to put your money on market structure right now and the probability of getting it approved, where would you be betting right now?
Yeah.
Josh wants to say pass.
Is there any good answer here? I mean, because, for example, just hypothetically, if I were to say no, is that what the message that we want to be transmitting here? Again, like with what prediction becomes reality, I think just like we don't want to, I don't know if you guys remember, but back in the day when I was like, let's not call it crypto winter. Let's call it like a crypto storm or like a crypto tornado that's going to swiftly pass. Like, I don't want to say that I wouldn't think that something that we really want to have done would not be done. At the same time, I don't want to give like a wildly optimistic take, but I would say, I think a fundamental question that comes out, and this is my way of avoiding the question a bit, is
very elegant.
Think that it's better to have something passed than something imperfect passed? And I know like often people say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but are these points at the margin, or are these points at the heart of things where the disputes are centered? And so I think that's something to think about. I do think though, however likely or unlikely this is, if people can't come to agreement about certain points, at least having some kind of skinny down aspect that would, or legislation that could at least begin to grant statutory authority, to the extent not already there, to the SEC and the CFTC to begin divvying up, their respective jurisdictional reaches right here, or however we want to phrase it. Because as we see this exciting work that the SEC is doing and the CFTC is doing, right, and rulemaking and proposed rulemaking and other agencies as well, it would really be a shame not to be able to defend that if someone challenged and said, federal agencies, there's no more Chevron deference. You've gone beyond your statutory authority. So at least can we get something? But yeah, that's my non-answer.
I mean, I, Josh, you and I and David have been on a lot of working group calls and other meetings, and I'm with you. I know where you're going with that, and I'm a little more optimistic than I think a lot of things that are being discussed in public. I think, we've had conversations about will the Congress parse out some pieces of it, right, Josh, for later legislation for the benefit of moving something forward. And there's certainly some possibilities there, but I think the big headwind is politics. And I think we talked about this. Shout out to Adam Goldberg and others who are kind of our policy experts. And I think the three of us learn from them every time they speak. But I think some of it is perceptual and some of it is political. I think there's a compromise that might be available. I think the clock is just running down on some of that. And it'll be interesting to see how long that does or doesn't take. And one last point to that, David, and I'd love to get your perspectives as well. But Josh, to the point you raised about SEC and CFTC, I think there's a joint task force live broadcast and meeting on Thursday. I know some of our WSBA members and friends will be there, but that to me says a lot. In the absence of clear market structure, the regulators are, unlike what we'd seen in the past, doing their best to create as many guardrails as they can within their remit. And I think the market knows that.
What about you, David?
So I will say that, of course, I want to see something pass, but I do want to see something positive pass. And so I do worry that relitigating issues that have already been addressed to get a bill passed may not be the best version of the bill. It's very challenging because these are really thorny issues. And I think because there's no more Chevron deference, we want to see as much as we can, in statute and not relying on rulemaking. And I think because of the nature of the industry we're in, it makes it even harder. And so I think also, there's varying levels of interest. I think there's more interest on one side of the aisle than the other. But I think sometimes people, as they start reading the bills, are really diving into the weeds. I think more questions probably popped up for some people as they got into it further. Because, we're all like watching it and reading the drafts, but I think only now maybe certain constituents are really like focusing on it. And I think it raises more questions. So I think, that's an issue too.
To that point, though, David, let's, to be clear, some of the banking interests in the country pushed back on a lot of what we'd seen. And we, Josh, David, we've seen or heard colleagues, members say the banking industry was sort of blindsided by Genius, or at least weren't able to participate in the way that they should have, and now are like full bore coming out against market structure legislation. But that does fly in the face, and I get it. And we've seen the responses from some of those banking groups, but it does fly a little bit in the face of work that banks are actually doing to participate in the ecosystem, including stablecoins, including tokenization. So it seems to me, how do those balance, Josh?
I agree. Like I said, I've been really, in a way, surprised that, pleasantly surprised that work has not slowed, that actually, new things. Like I was just on the phone with one bank about a certain project that is being structured in a particular way because of limitations on what the bank wants to do, right? And so I'm not going to give away anything privileged, don't worry. But in the context of a conversation where I said something like, well, because we're trying to structure it this way so you don't ever have to do X, Y, and Z. And the response that I actually got from the bank was, well, actually, we're going to be contacting you because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be doing that XYZ thing that we're not doing for this piece, right? So it's that was, I was excited to hear that for a number of reasons, but it's also a bit, surprising. So, but also I think part of that is my understanding, which could be incomplete, well, certainly is incomplete and could be wrong, is that a lot of the people, a lot of the banks opposing what's currently in Genius which they're calling a loophole, and some may call a feature that permits certain parties to provide exposure to yield for stablecoins, if not issuers. That some of those are community banks, right?
Yeah.
And not just the large global banks. I do think what's interesting is if the bank lobby, and again, have warm feelings for everyone, if they're opposing the passage of a market structure bill, then doesn't that mean essentially that without some other legislation, they kind of have to deal with, genius as it is, with that so-called loophole / feature? So it would seem that from the bank lobby perspective, getting something passed that moves the needle on that at least a little bit from their perspective. I'm not saying that the crypto space wants that, but you would think from a game theory perspective, they would be incentivized to get something going as opposed to sticking with what is now from their perspective.
Can I add one point to that, Josh? And I think it's really well said. And you both know this, I think. Several years back, I had the opportunity to, I won't name, no privileged information, but speak to a community bank group. This had to be just before the last crypto winter, Josh. And, after a long series of conversations throughout the day, the takeaway that I was told was, we don't care about this. We're never going to have to care about this. We just don't care. And they were patently wrong. So some of this feels like institutionalized catch up and realizing they've got to play the game and realizing they haven't been paying attention to it. And in the not paying attention, it becomes, well, we don't like it. Am I over emotionalizing that, David or Josh?
No, look, I think community banks have a real opportunity here if they want to play in the ecosystem to benefit from it. Mm-hmm. And especially they could offer things, they could differentiate themselves from other, financial institutions by offering some of these products. Mm-hmm. But I think we have this really weird sort of 3-dimensional game going on. We have maybe it's 4-dimensional. We have the bank's interests. We have the crypto, the crypto industry, but they're not, the crypto industry's interests aren't aligned. Some centralized exchanges want certain things in there and some decentralized exchanges want other things in there. So we're not wholly aligned. And then you have the 2 political parties who have their own views and their own, agendas as well. So we're really, it's a really interesting situation because usually there's sort of like 1 or 2 parties that are conflicting with each other. But here we have 4 that all have different interests, and can we meld it together? And so I think the calendar is working against us also. Although I also remain positive and optimistic, I think the calendar is working against us. And I think that, the closer we get to midterms, the less of a chance we'll see passage.
I want to point out that since we went live, Josh, the Bitcoin is up 1.3%. We're holding 90,700.
Good.
But
not,
by the way,
not causal. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Josh.
I mean, who knows? So when I just mentioned the community banks, it did make me think, when David started saying the community banks could get involved, it made me think back to Quantic Bank, which of course, was an early, leader in this space, in terms of a community bank, the digital first institution. Sadly, Steve Schnall, who many of you may know or may have known, he was a CEO, and he was very, very forward thinking in terms of crypto and trying to get exposure to people to Bitcoin and other digital assets. Sadly, he passed away, I think, in 2022 in an accident. But I think he's an amazing example of someone who took a community bank and really, I think he received entrepreneurship awards and things like that. Very forward thinking about the possibilities with crypto and blockchain technology. And I just wanted, since we were just talking about that, I wanted to mention that. And it was a very big loss, and he also was a great guy.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to make community banks sound monolithic.
No, not you didn't. It just it happened to make me think of him for a second. That was all.
Yeah, no, you're right. There are innovators in every group, and sometimes they get heard, and sometimes they don't get the credit they deserve.
Yeah, I do want to talk about tokenization because I think, we hear it mentioned at Davos, and I can tell you that I've been working on a very large crypto tokenization project that's moving forward, and I can't say too much more about it, but we're seeing no action relief being granted in the area of tokenization, and so and you saw conflicting views. I think BlackRock has one view, Citadel had a different view, and that was playing out in Davos. So I think we are front and center now, and I do think that we can reach some sort of accord. It's just not clear to me if we have enough time now to get legislation passed.
David, were you at Davos? I'm curious.
Nope, I was in Arizona. I was very happy to be out in the Southwest for a few days to recharge.
To that point, though, David and Josh, if I could, when we talk about tokenization, and I'd seen some of the commentary coming out of Davos, it also makes me think about some of the news we'd seen. I think New York Stock Exchange, ICE, has put forward, they're moving forward with a plan to offer 24/7 trading in tokenized security. And I think Anthony Pompliano, shout out to him, posted this on one of his newsletters earlier this week. There a lot of times seems to be this presumption of a zero-sum game, meaning exchanges will tokenize or they absolutely will not. It's never going to happen. I mean, ICE seems to take an approach that Pompliano mentioned, which is they're going to try both. Yeah. I think we're seeing that percolate through a lot of different industry verticals. Are you seeing the same thing, or do you think that's kind of a foolish way for me to look at it?
I think I'm seeing similar. I think it's a good way to look at it. And I think also, tokenization, frankly, that is the number one request for trainings across large organizations. Mm-hmm. Just meetings, all kinds of things from banks and other large asset managers. It's really become a big thing. And I think whether or not you feel like, whether or not these institutions actually are like, yay, crypto, yay, blockchain. Yeah. There are other things to think about. For example, like the New York Stock Exchange announcement, it talked about 24/7 trading. Yeah. Right. So it's, aside from the technological advances and all of the exciting stuff with having tokenized securities, which the regulators at a federal level, the SEC, the CFTC's recent letters and guidance about, tokenized collateral and all kinds of stuff. It's all, there's a path that people can see. But I think also some of it is just when you look at the crypto markets and the 24/7 trading, it's almost quaint to look at our more traditional trading of stocks and stuff like that. So I think some of this is going to, no matter whether you're a crypto fan or not, some of this is just moving. It's just the direction of travel. I do think, though, that people should be aware, and I try and stress this, although this is an area that I'm looking into more and more, and I'm admittedly not expert in, is quantum. Yeah. Right. And thinking about if these are large scale changes coming to these massive cruise ships of industry, or maybe not cruise ships, like aircraft carriers of industry, you also have to think about future proofing them, right? And thinking about what's coming down the pike.
I don't know, Josh, if you're aware, that was the easiest softball you've handed me in a long, long time. We actually are getting a quantum webinar out there, a WSBA webinar, later in February with some quantum experts. And it's interesting to see because, like so many of the industries we talk about, there seems to be two camps. There are some really smart technology people saying, quantum's coming, everyone's doomed, it's going to blow up the BTC network. And other folks who are equally qualified quantum scientists saying, yeah, it's going to be years and that's not going to happen. So it'll be interesting to see that webinar tee up. And I don't know if you've both read some of the stuff in the quantum space. That's really complicated stuff. like coherence, Josh. And if you put too many quantum computer qubits together, things go off the rails. It's like, what? There's a lot there.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, I'm just, swimming along, trying to get the information in my gills or whatever. Like,
yeah, I'm with you.
But yeah, I mean, some of the things when you hear about them, like, okay, what is it? Shor's algorithm will be able to help people derive private keys from public keys, right? Other things, which is relevant for like payments and identity and all kinds of things other than crypto. And then I think another one is like Grover's algorithm and like reducing the strength of hash. See, I have been reading on this.
Do you see the polymath that we're dealing with, David, that we're on podcast with?
We're going seriously in the weeds today. No, it's good. But I'm going to pull it back a little bit. But I do think that...
He's got to rein us in, Josh.
I do think that the technology that crypto is underlied by, being a blockchain has led to quicker, transaction times. Look, we used to be T+2 forever. Yeah. T+1 now, now using blockchain technology, people can trade on the weekends. Yeah. Remember how, crypto would move ahead of the stock market because it was the only thing trading on the weekends. Yeah. So we'd see these big moves when there were geopolitical events or other things because crypto was the first thing you could get liquidity in now. So now we're seeing, the traditional market to follow along. So I think these are all good things. I do think for tokenization, we do have to find a way, like, how do we make it go to the mainstream and not sort of just accredited investors and institutions? And like, what does that look like? And will regular individuals want to trade tokenized securities? I mean, I think they will over time, but I still think we have a bridge to gap from tokenization for institutions to getting it to the mainstream and what it will look like for the mainstream.
But David, to that point, I mean, and Josh, as we talk about tokenization, one of the things I've seen in the news is, at least from those pushing back on 24/7 tokenized security trading by NYSE, is, well, that's only weekend traders or retail traders. No one will want to do that. But I feel that's very short-sighted because you can have institutional algorithmic trading 24/7, 365. So this idea that you're only creating that for the gambling retail class is really a false dichotomy to me.
Go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it makes for some interesting issues that when you have like ETFs and things like that, and you buy into a position on a Friday and you think you're one place, and then it's moved a lot on a Monday. Now it still happens anyway because it would just move in the pre-markets, but look, I think that's where we're moving to. I think we're moving to 24/7, and I think the ability to trade crypto 24/7 has moved our traditional markets to start wanting to trade 24/7 and being capable of trading 24/7. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I agree, and I also think if someone is saying that only retail is going to be trading on the weekends, so the institutional is just going to sit there and just react on Monday, like, oh, what happened? Like, oh,
you only have bankers' hours. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, like I just don't see that as like a real, like, yes, it may be driven by people wanting to, individuals wanting to trade on the weekend, but like no one's with the big positions gonna like sit there and just wait for something to happen. I think one of the big things that I've been trying to stress with clients and others about tokenization is, what even are we talking about here? So when we say tokenized securities or tokenized equity, even if you drill down, like, what do we mean? Do we actually mean, in the case, for example, of tokenized equity, does the company consider you a stockholder or a shareholder, right? An equity holder? Do they know about you at all, right? Also, is this just, price exposure to the underlying stock? If it is price exposure or some other kind of, wrapped thing, does the entity from which you are obtaining this tokenized equity, does it actually have those actual shares set aside somewhere? Right? Like, are there, or is this just completely synthetic? Like, is it tied to nothing? What is it going on?
We had this. Go ahead, Josh. I'm sorry. I keep
no. And then sometimes people, when they say tokenized securities, they want them to be able to do this. Okay, like, are we just talking about? And I know, like, some people may bristle with this because, of course, the view of the token isn't security, except if you is traditional security. But sometimes when I hear people talking about this, all they're talking about, it seems, are forms of ICOs. So it's like the full gamut of, like, well, do you actually mean, like, there is no paper, there is nothing stapled to this? Does the token give you the vote? Like, all this sort of stuff. Is there dematerialization from written things? Is that even possible under the relevant state law or other jurisdictions' laws? There's so many things like that, that it's like people tell you. I think there's a tendency, and it's a lot of times, and I do this too, where, like, someone will say something and it'll be like, oh yeah, of course, because you don't want to look like, what the heck? I don't know it enough. I feel like this is one of these areas where if someone says, oh yeah, I have a tokenized security platform, that should just be like, you should know that is clear as mud as to what that is actually meaning. You're offering tokenized securities, like, okay, explain.
I feel like Josh just opened the Pandora's box of things we need to talk about, and I don't even know if we have enough time. But David, Josh, I'm with you, and I feel like far too many people are saying tokenization and not understanding the implications of that. But it also points to something, David. I think it was at our tokenization working group, one of the working groups you and I were on before you went on vacation. Are we talking about actual tokenized securities that are issued on a blockchain, which opens up an entire series of, what about custody? What about transfer agents? What does that mean? Or are you just talking about a digital twin, which becomes, can I arb now between a digital twin of security and that security? I mean, that's a can of worms that I think people haven't really fully digested yet.
Yeah, I don't think we want people arbing between the security and the tokenized security.
But you can imagine there's someone who would.
No, I can. Everybody's always looking for an edge. But I don't think that's what we want it to be. I always think of tokenizing as really like unlocking liquidity and things that haven't been liquid. So I think maybe they're different buckets. Like, we can have these, like, I think it's more like a synthetic. It's, instead of a tokenized security, it's like a synthetic security. And then we have assets that you can actually tokenize and unlock liquidity from. So that's how I sort of think about it. I mean, I don't know if that's gone into the nomenclature yet, but that's how I look at it.
But Josh, like David, Josh, I wanted to ask you, because I think you and I've had this conversation, like, what would it take to be able to issue equities, or what it would take for Josh Corp to IPO on a blockchain? Like, what needs to change for that to happen? And it's not simple in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, well, we have seen things like, for example, just INX, right? It offered, it filed an F1. I think it's Gibraltarian, right? If I remember correctly. And that was some form of an equity security at the time. We've seen other things like Stacks doing, the A+ back in the day. We've seen back in the day Overstock having rights offering, and I think some kind of bond offering back in the, if I'm remembering correctly, that traded on T0, but it was a very, very small circle of potential holders or something, if I'm remembering correctly, which I may not be remembering correctly for everyone at home.
What a memory, though. I totally forgot about that one, David.
But yeah, I mean, so I think there are pieces like that could potentially we can look to in the past. But I think also we have to think of state law. I mean, if we remember Delaware and Andrea Tiniano and the Delaware Blockchain Initiative, a big piece of that was enabling us to have, stock ledgers on a blockchain. And there were some amendments to state law, if I'm remembering correctly, that made clear that it could be maintained not by a natural person, but by a system or something. I'm trying to pull things from the past into my brain, so this may not be precise. But I think for things like that, we also have to think about, okay, where is this entity organized? Yeah. And is this permissible under the jurisdiction, state or otherwise, to even have blockchain-based records, and things like that. So I think there are multiple layers of inquiry about how this would work. And of course, even, and this is one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the considerations that people have had when thinking about why we haven't in the US seen the kind of digital bond offerings that we have elsewhere in the world. Part of it is like dematerializing from the paper, not necessarily having the paper, even though it might not be like physical paper, it might just be documents, can make it hard, for example, to give an enforceability opinion. So there's lots of stuff.
For a non-lawyer, why would that be, Josh? Can you, is there some clarity you can add to that?
I think I haven't thought about this in great detail in a while, but my recollection is that there are certain things that we would want to see in documentation, right? And if there is no documentation, then it's hard to know whether and how the parties would be bound. But that's really I'm glossing over that because I would need to refresh my recollection about what exactly our discussions were when faced with these issues, to be frank.
David, Josh, we're almost out of time. David, go ahead, weigh in, buddy.
No. I'm agreeing. It gets very complicated. It might be a lot for people to chew on a Friday afternoon, but it gets very complicated.
We went deep.
Well, should we talk about any of the IPOs?
Oh, you
can. We're on IPOs.
I know David has some strong feelings.
Look, I think that as crypto companies go to the IPO market, are we just taking more liquidity from crypto tokens and putting it back into the equity market? And so that's sort of like, I think, another pool of liquidity that's moving away from crypto and into the equity market. At the same time, look, some of these companies have been building for years. And of course, they want to have, a liquidity event. And so I think it's good that they're able to go to market. And, I think we have like 4 or 5 or 6 in the pipeline. So I think it's just another dynamic that's going on in the crypto markets and where the liquidity is going.
But I take that as a sentiment signal too, David. I mean, a year ago or 2 years ago, that the IPO funnel would have been empty for crypto companies. I take it as a signal for, despite concerns about market structure and despite some of the, how do we define, Josh, what you were talking about from a tokenization perspective, the fact that they want to go IPO is a positive sentiment signal in my mind.
I'm going to say yes and no, because I think they wanted to go IPO for a while and just weren't able to.
Sure.
Because I think we know a few companies that have been waiting for a window. But on the flip side, there are buyers and there are bankers that are selling these shares on syndications, prior to the IPOs. I think Binance bought an allocation of BitGo before it went IPO. That was reported. So I think, yes, I think maybe they're going public a little later than they wanted, but I'm glad that there is liquidity and interest in people buying them.
Josh, can I go off script real quickly? Josh,
never. Of course.
And I know some people, I'm going to, keeping with the theme of crypto, obviously, and I know some people aren't particularly keen or are keen for CZ's perspectives, but I did see earlier this morning that his comment, and I haven't dove into it too deeply, that crypto is the payment layer for AI. And that's an interesting spoke to this whole hub of conversations to me, because I think there's some truth to that. When we look at, AI being able to make transactions and buy or sell things, Josh, for us, for example, or, when my refrigerator pays its proportionate share of the electricity bill at some point, you can imagine crypto being part of that, no?
100%. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Tim.
No, Josh, it's okay. My question is, will crypto be a part of that, or will they be stable coins be part of that?
I want my Optimus humanoid robot to be able to pay in whatever way he thinks best for me.
Okay.
Well, that's so interesting, though, David, that you're drawing a distinction between crypto and stable coins, right? So interesting, because one could draw the distinction and say, well, that's within the crypto bucket, right? So have the stable coins jumped the
Jump the shark.
Line, the shark. I was going to say the shark, but I was like, I'm not sure whether that. Yeah.
You know, in my mind, as I think about it, yes, they have. Like I see, you know, you look at stablecoins backed by dollars. You know, those are like digital representations of dollars in some ways. I mean, I'm really simplifying things, but so in my mind, yes. And in my mind too, one of the things I always think about is, are stablecoins going to cannibalize the broader crypto market? And that's something like whenever we're like thinking and talking about all of this, that's a lens that I think about.
Yeah. Josh, I don't know if you've seen it. I just noticed that David now has forced us to rename to the Crypto and Stablecoin Roundup. So thanks for that, David. Well, crypto and stablecoins are still property from a tax perspective. Emma, really good point. Thank you for raising that. So I will continue to only call it Crypto Roundup from now on. But, you know, again, Emma points to something that is a constant conversation both here and in Europe, taxation issues. And, you know, we still have a lot of work to do, I think, in that realm as well.
Yeah, we really need a de minimis exemption.
Man, Emma's going deep dive, and we need de minimis, and Emma's going deep on tax. The tax code has to change before they can be used in the U.S. for payments.
Yeah, totally agree.
Spot on, Emma, spot on.
We really need that, and I don't know if it gets into this bill, but whether it be, you know, $500, $2,000, $5,000, we do need the de minimis exception. So
I mean, you know, David buys big ticket items, Josh. He probably wants a pretty high de minimis exemption, no?
You know, 50,000 would be great too, but we got to start somewhere. But we, all kidding aside, we do need something, because I think even the best intentioned person, if they're using crypto on a daily basis and buying things with it, it's really, really hard to keep track of everything if you're using it on that. I don't mean trading, but I just mean actual utility. It's really hard.
I don't know if Emma is saying tax rules or taxes rule. I'm not quite sure where she wants to go with that. But Emma, good point. We got to get you back on the show. David, Josh, we're just about out of time. Josh, what have you got coming up besides the Snow Armageddon?
Well, I mean, I think what I have coming up is going to be largely affected by how much snow or how little snow or how quickly it's cleared. But yeah, just working. I do have coming up though in the next few weeks. I'll be going to the Digital Asset Forum in London, and speaking there. So excited about that. I also this has nothing to do with me, but just for actually, I will say in the next week. Although maybe I can mention it next week too. My kids are going to be doing a musical. They're very excited about Shrek Jr. Wow. So that's next weekend. But I did want to just give a quick shout out, you know, to the team at Brex, who were, you know, Brex was acquired by Capital One, and you know, just thought I'd mention that since good news for them. What about you guys? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, Ron, what are you up to?
I've got the shovel waiting. I've got a nice couple of bottles of Sauvignon Blanc ready to go for the weekend. I've got to do a lot of prep work for that quantum webinar, which means I have to read about quantum more than I ever thought I would have to. But we also have, matter of fact, Emma, shout out to Emma again. She's working with some of our colleagues on a response to UK stablecoin requests for comment. We're working on a commentary response to the FDIC's notice of proposed rulemaking. Christmas is over and business is business, David. So that's where I'm going for the next several days. How about you?
I'm going to be doing a little bit of market structure reading. I'm going to the beach tomorrow, and I will think about you warmly when you're dealing with this.
You're a monster, David. You're a monster.
And then Sunday is going to be a football Sunday. The conference finals are this weekend, so on Sunday. So looking forward to a little barbecue and some football.
I just want to point out one last thing, Josh and David, if I could, for the audience. David Brill, off the Gulf Stream on his vacation in the Southwest, still texting about markets. That's how dedicated he is to this space.
It's actually, you know, I was actually trying to watch the Roundup last Friday. I was on a plane, but signal on the Gulf Stream needs to be upgraded.
No Starlink? I'm concerned.
No, I think you need Starlink very soon.
Josh, you were going to say, you got the last word, Josh.
Yep.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, I just quickly looked at some of the comments, and even though they're not showing up for us on our chat over to the side, I do see that we have a number of comments from Sujatha Krishnan, Apologies for any mispronunciation, actually all mispronunciation by me. And it looks like she is of Cipher Node. So thank you for watching and tuning in with us. It sounds like they're doing some exciting agentic programs.
We will have to reach out and have that conversation. David, Josh, it's always good to see you both. For everyone who chimed in, as I lose my voice, sorry we missed some of your comments. Have a great weekend, everyone. For everyone impacted by the storm in the U.S.,